welcome to the Shadow Demon Talks. Today we will be exploring how you can support the Digimon community through social network sites such as, but not limited to, Facebook and Discord. While I originally planned on addressing how one could support the series through its community as a whole, supporting the community is a broad subject. I divided it into 3 categories: social networking, social media, and the offline community. As you'll see, the subject could have been broken up even further. However, one must compromise at some point, for there is much to cover, so detailed analysis will have to be sacrificed at times. As for why the community is the first method of supporting the franchise that we will look at, just as an argument needs a solid foundation, so too does a successful franchise. Even if a series were to prosper, if the community is small and toxic, people will abandon it and it will fade into obscurity. To begin with, I'd like you to imagine the community split into 3 major factions. The first would be the core. These select individuals are not only the most well known within and outside of the community, but are also the most likely to be able to positively or negatively affect the franchise through their actions. These people consist of page admins, content creators, and other individuals whose words for one reason or another carry weight. The second is the outer shell, consisting of the largest portion of the community who is there because they love the series, but either often stay silent, or even if they do speak, their actual presence is still negligible. And finally are the satellites, people who may or may not be part of or even know of the group. These are new recruits, the fresh blood that the rest of the community has brought in through various means. They have no precedence with the series other than it either sounding neat or being told that they would like it, so more often than not, first impressions, even within the community, will dictate whether they stick around and join the outer shell or abandon the franchise entirely. If the imagery wasn't clear enough, the comparison was to that of a planet, and as we likely all know of planets, the stronger the gravitational pull is of the core, the larger the outer crust, or gas, is, as well as drawing in more satellites. While there isn't much to say in regard to the core members themselves other than that they should realize that the position they are in carries weight, and they should use it responsibly, how they are treated is another matter. They are the face of the community, so one shouldn't feel bad about propping them up as a personality to both draw in people and keep others around, but as personalities, their image should remain as pure to concept as possible. If one has issue with how a core member is acting, instead of publicly berating them, they should try to settle it privately. Now, if one sees someone speaking ill of a core member or sees the beginning of an internal strife between 2 core members, they should act to settle the matter as quickly and discreetly as possible. This, of course, is not the same as openly coming to their defense. The goal is not to protest the accuser and try to change their mind, but to handle the situation while leaving their image intact. In the case of a core member becoming increasingly toxic within a community, no longer showing pride for the position they hold, they can be expelled from it, but if at all possible, this should be done quickly, quietly, and hopefully with a replacement on standby. Generally, however, the core is rarely an issue. Its members have long since found comfort in their relationship to both the franchise as well as their position, so they are both rare to cause problems as well as rare to have problems. The main area we generally see issues arise is within the outer crust. From what I've seen, the Digimon community is actually a prime example of what a good outer crust should be. Very nice and serene. If a new member shows up, everyone is nice to them and kindly answers any questions they have, and disagreements generally don't tend to become too severe. That said, no outer crust is without its issues. Drama and toxicity can be found anywhere, and depending on how overt it is in nature, as well as how pointed it is, it can lead to many issues. Satellites won't want to join the outer crust, those within the outer crust can actually be put off to the point of leaving, and the core members can actually be pushed to the point of either dampening their image by involving themselves in drama, or taking a break due to being overly stressed. So I would like to briefly talk about toxicity and drama. A disclaimer before I do though, this is an extremely broad topic that I could talk on for weeks. So while I will present some basic information, I encourage anyone that actively spends their time within these groups to please do more research on the topic, as you never know when you might end up being able to keep someone around with what you knew. Bringing it back though, drama is generally an overt display of toxicity that usually comes about by one person acting in a toxic fashion and another person responding in kind. So while I hardly feel as if I've earned this conclusion and ask that if this makes sense to you to please fill in the blanks, to avoid drama, when you see toxic behaviors, you react calmly and try to de-escalate the situation. Within a community, who is right and who is wrong is almost universally less important than settling the matter. As for toxicity itself, I will do my best to briefly explain my beliefs on why toxicity generally appears and ask once more that if what I'm saying makes sense to you, for you to fill in the blanks. While we all know that trolls exist online, we are far too quick to assume we are dealing with trolls when we see toxic behavior. The two most common forms of toxicity that one will likely see is gatekeeping and treating opinions as facts in an elitist fashion. Within a niche community, these are generally not signs of a troll. Much more likely is that these are defensive behaviors of someone who was never able to share their passion for the franchise with anyone they knew, so they formed a solo identity with it, where they were special for liking it. When they found that there were others like them, they became overly excited, but then were met with opinions that differed from their own, and worse than liking the franchise by themselves, they felt as if these people were grotesquely mischaracterizing the series' identity, which also in part happens to be their identity, which can't be stood for. Mind you, this isn't something anyone would realize about themselves, but once you approach it from this angle, you begin to see how sad the arguments they start are. These people are genuine fans who poured their hearts out for the franchise. They would be one of the first to support it in any way they could, but they are at war with the community that they also want to love. While there are times when these people need to be banned, if at all possible when you see this behavior, try to drop down into the comments and instead of telling them they are wrong or that they need to calm down, agree with them. Let them have the win, and gently let them know that it's okay for people to have differing opinions, because hearts and minds can be changed. It just takes time, and I'd like to keep as many people around as possible. Each one is important. Once the core and outer crust of the community have been stabilized as much as it can be, it's time to turn your attention outwards to the skies and start bringing in new members. There's plenty of ways to go about this, so do not limit yourself by what will be presented. First are those who wander into the community either of their own accord or because they were invited. They're still not prepared to join, but they might. While these types don't want to be called out or put into the limelight, there are still many factors that can affect their decision. If it's a Facebook group, for example, the thought put into the rules can be relevant, as they may see it as indicative to how the community acts. They may also look through the posts within the community, so having posts that bridge the gap between new and old members can look really appealing. Then we have those in other groups who may have interest but are either unaware of the franchise or are not consciously thinking of it. These satellites are generally easy enough to recruit. While one should never be so uncouth as to jump into an unrelated group and blatantly advertise for another, with a little bit of tact, one can advertise by referring back to the group. An easy example of this being another TCG group trying to recruit for the Digimon TCG. While discussing the mechanics, one can mention that they are reminded of the new Digimon TCG, or when looking at artwork, the player base, etc. One of the hardships of niche series is that these products simply aren't known by everyone, but this makes casual discussion by its community that much more effective at drawing in new members. The final thing I would like to talk about, and for much longer than I actually will be, is one of the biggest flaws made within any discussion. A hidden toxicity, if you will, that maintains stability but halts the advancement and growth of communities, as well as prevents many great quality of life improvements for those within it. One of the most amazing things about a community, even for a niche franchise such as Digimon, is its sheer size being comprised of thousands of humans, each one with their own thoughts and ideas of how to improve the franchise, and each idea, if supported, possibly could. It's rare to see even 100 people act in unison on something. So if an entire community stood behind a project, there would almost guaranteed to be results. But this is where we are faced with an issue far greater than direct opposition. We see the issue of dilution. When someone asks for input on their ideas, it is a wonderful time to make suggestions, and everyone can come together to make the idea better. When someone tries putting an idea into practice, however, the time for input on the idea has passed. Dilution happens when thousands of individuals within a community see an idea being put into practice, and even though they think that the idea is a good one that could have positive results, their ego takes over and they start offering either constructive criticism publicly or offering a different idea entirely, which slows the momentum of the idea to a crawl, splitting the groups between several ideas instead of standing firm behind one, until eventually all of the ideas just become a fun what-if scenario that fades into obscurity. This can be seen everywhere. If someone starts a petition, you will likely see comments about how it won't accomplish anything and you should do something else instead, even though the takeaway is that whoever commented doesn't believe that the petition is hurting anything. They just wanted to voice their thoughts on it, which accomplished nothing but to harm the petition. Another simple way to look at how this effectively makes everyone lose out is if 10 people got together and wanted to plan an event. Ideally, people would say that they all bring their best ideas to the table and create an event that everyone can be happy with. This is rarely the case, though. Generally, everyone knows how they would like the event to play out, and since no one can agree, they end up with an event that is adequate for everyone, but no one is overly excited about. The assumption that most people make here is that they are limited on time and can only plan out one event, but in more cases than not, they actually could do a weekly event where everyone is able to bring their ideas to life if everyone worked together. While there's a lot I would like to say on the matter, I'll conclude it with this. While we live in a world that often provides us with immediate satisfaction, and we're often subconsciously taught that if we don't fight for our own opinions, then we will be left unsatisfied, within a supportive community, it is okay to wait your turn. Help others succeed and message them discreetly with ideas to help them out. Your ego can take a back seat for a couple of weeks, and once one project ends, you can be vocal about a new one. While it may be idealistic to expect everyone to behave in this manner, if we all do our best to, we will begin to see changes in others. So to summarize, always try to handle drama and toxicity discreetly, and try to deal with it through the use of kindness and understanding. Both striving for and the image of a wholesome community is one that will effortlessly attract and maintain members. While it is wonderful that communities are made up of thousands of members to help each other, it can make getting ideas off the ground hard as egos clash and everyone wants their shot at making something work. When possible, curb your ego for a bit and help people out trying to get something going. Your time will come. It doesn't have to be now, such as during Operation Generation of Destiny. And once more, I'd like to encourage everyone watching to go out and research the topics I've described. They are all extremely broad in nature, but all pivotal in the health of a community. Join me next week as I examine how you can support the community through the use of social media such as YouTube, video games, and other outlets. Until next time, stay wholesome.